Melania Trump lost it as Jasmine Crockett exposes her criminal past on live TV. Have you ever watched a former First Lady's carefully crafted smile crumble under the weight of her own secrets? Tonight, we peel back the glittering veneer and expose the woman who abandoned her first marriage, wove a web of hidden alliances, and clawed her way into the spotlight. In just 7 minutes of live television, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will drop a folder that could shatter a nation's faith in its highest office. What happens when ambition turns ruthless and the truth finally demands to be heard? Stay with us, because in this story, silence isn't safety, it's complicity. If you believe that no one, no matter how powerful, should hide behind a smile, hit like now. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a second of this unfolding drama. Drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you think the truth will set us free or destroy us all? Buckle up, because in the next half hour, everything you thought you knew about ambition and betrayal will be turned upside down. She was born Melania Calves in a small Slovenian town, far from the gilded towers of New York or the marble halls of Washington. Picture a dusty village square, pastel houses with peeling paint, a girl who dreamed of lights brighter than the Adriatic sunrise. At 18, she married a quietly successful local businessman. Let's call him Andrej. A stable union built on comfort and tradition, the kind of life most would envy. But Melania never wanted simple. By 22, she slipped out of that marriage under cover of night, leaving behind wedding photos and whispered promises. She arrived in Manhattan with nothing but a suitcase of ambition and a name she would soon reshape: Melania Trump. In penthouse parties above Fifth Avenue, she learned the currency of power. How a well-timed smile opens doors, how a whispered compliment can crack the hardest safe. She mastered every social nuance, every subtle code that separated the moguls, the tycoons, the Madison Avenue gatekeepers, from the rest of the world. She swapped the cold concrete of Slovenia for limousines and custom gowns. And you see her metamorphosis. The same sharp eyes that once watched market traders in her hometown now scanned cocktail tables at Trump Tower, sizing up potential allies. Every handshake was an investment. Every introduction, a strategic move. She wasn't just building a social network. She was constructing a staircase straight to the White House lawn. Meanwhile, in a cramped Capitol Hill office, Jasmine Crockett was forging her own path. Raised on the south side of Dallas, she'd watched power slip through her community. Families bulldozed for luxury condos, voices stifled in city halls. She knew what it felt like to be invisible. A bright law student with no legacy, no silver spoon, only grit, and a stack of receipts. After law school, she became a public defender, fighting for clients ignored by the system. Later, she won a congressional seat on the backs of grassroots volunteers who believed that one determined voice could topple the giants. Now, Jasmine kept a folder thicker than her day planner. Court filings, offshore account ledgers, sealed affidavits from upstate New York. Each page was a pixel in the portrait of a woman who had reinvented herself so many times that her own truth faded to a blur. Jasmine had seen that pattern before: ambition fueled by erasure, identity traded like a commodity. The soft click of a lawyer's briefcase drowning out the cries of those left behind. In the weeks before their confrontation, Jasmine haunted quiet diners outside Fort Worth, sipping black coffee while plotting each question, each reveal. She mapped Melania's journey from Andre's comfort to Donald's spotlight, traced the money flows from Slovenian patent filings to British Virgin Islands shell companies, and felt a familiar fire build. The same fire that had driven her out of law school classrooms and into the halls of Congress. Now the stage was set, in a Stamford, Connecticut studio, neutral ground, far from the red state politics of Texas and the glitter of Mar-a-Lago. For guests, one moderator, and millions of eyes ready for the usual partisan sparring. No one expected Jasmine to unpack her folder and lay bare a secret Melania had buried under gowns and gloss. But Jasmine wasn't there to play nice. She was there to shatter the illusion that charisma equals innocence, that luxury equals legitimacy. As the cameras warmed up, Jasmine reminded herself of every whispered warning. They'll come for you. She felt her pulse spike, fingertips tingling against the leather-bound folder. Beside her, the studio lights hummed a low warning siren in a room built for spectacle. Across the table sat Melania Trump, poised, immaculate, the perfect picture of fashionable grace. But behind that cultivated calm, Jasmine saw the flush in her cheeks, the slight tremor in her hands. This wasn't just a moment of political theater. It was the collision of two worlds, one built on privilege and careful erasure, the other on relentless pursuit of accountability. And in the next few minutes, every viewer at home would witness the beginning of a reckoning no amount of spin could contain. She slipped out of that first marriage like a shadow at midnight. No goodbyes, no explanations, leaving behind a stunned Andre and a lifetime of unanswered questions. Imagine the hush of Andre's house, the flicker of a single lamp in the hallway, and then nothing. That night didn't just mark the end of a marriage. It was the ignition of a carefully choreographed descent. A woman sealed off her past, repacked her identity, and set her sights on a new prize. By the time Melania appeared at her first Trump Tower gala, she was already an expert at concealment. Under discreet chandeliers and behind mirrored pillars, she whispered her way into the confidence of the powerful. A compliment here, a well-timed lament there, each word a calculated step on a social chessboard. One influential banker remarked later, "It felt like she knew exactly who to target, exactly when to strike." That single phrase should have sent a chill through anyone who believed in innocence. But this wasn't a simple rags-to-riches tale. Hidden in her bespoke wardrobe were documents few ever glimpsed. Corporate filings in Slovenia, shell companies in the British Virgin Islands, and Swiss patent records dated years after she claimed to be a full-time New York resident. Each file told a fragment of a story she never wanted told, and every fragment added weight to the question that no one dared ask. What was she really running from? In contrast, Jasmine Crockett's story was raw and unvarnished. She remembered her first client, a single mother in South Dallas whose trailer had been bulldozed without warning. Jasmine fought for her night after night, digging through housing codes and tax assessments until she found a loophole that saved a home. That same tenacity drove her to Congress, a refusal to look the other way. She carried that spirit into her preparatory meetings, pacing the diner like a caged lioness, her folder sliding open and closed on the table, page after page of evidence. "I've seen this pattern before," she told Kenny, her chief of staff, voice low but unyielding. "When someone reinvents herself to this extent, there's always a price paid, often by the people left behind." Kenny nodded, worry creasing his brow. "They'll paint you as vengeful. Melania's team will unleash every tactic in their arsenal." Jasmine's eyes were steel. "Let them talk. We have the facts." As the clock ticked toward the live segment, tensions rippled through the studio. Producers fidgeted over monitors. The host, Felix Roman, rehearsed his opening lines, but his jaw clenched when he saw Jasmine's quiet determination. There was no script for what she planned next. When the microphones finally went live, the panel began with placid debate, immigration, infrastructure, the usual theater. Melania followed the choreography, a gracious nod here, a practiced smile there, deflecting any hint of controversy. She spoke in polished sentences, all warm tones and carefully measured glances. It was the same performance that had charmed magazine editors and late-night hosts. But then Jasmine spoke. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, yet every syllable carried steel. "Let's talk about who gets to walk away unscathed," she said, eyes locked on Melania. The room shifted, an audible intake of breath. That was our first mini-hook. Viewers at home felt the air change. Suddenly, they knew something big was coming. Jasmine leaned forward. "You left a marriage without a trace. No public statement, no legal filings that reflected closure. You claimed to be fully settled in New York. Yet your name appears on European business records for years after. You leveraged relationships, local influencers, campaign donors, even foreign nationals, to engineer a path to the White House." Her words were rockets. Cameras swung from Jasmine to Melania. A single camera hop captured Melania's first crack, an imperceptible tremor in her hand as she raised her coffee cup. "Show us the proof," Melania said, voice clipped but controlled, a feeble barricade against the tide. Jasmine exhaled and placed her folder on the table. Photocopies fanned out, a 1998 Swiss patent application bearing Melania's signature, a 2003 wire transfer routing funds through the British Virgin Islands to a shell company registered under her cousin's name, a sealed affidavit from Syracuse, New York, alleging wire fraud in a real estate deal. Mini switch. Viewers were no longer watching a routine panel. They were witnessing evidence laid bare, file by file. Every document was a thread unraveling a meticulously tailored image. You could almost feel the studio lights grow hotter. Melania's practiced poise wavered. Her eyes darted to the host, pleading for rescue. Felix opened his mouth as if to intervene, then hesitated, caught between journalistic neutrality and sheer astonishment. As Jasmine laid out the timeline from that Slovenian startup to the Miami consultancy with 0 employees and 6-figure loans, she painted a portrait of ambition so fierce it devoured everything in its path. "This isn't speculation," she said. "These are signed records, public filings, sealed court documents." And then came the psychological blow. "A question for you, Mrs. Trump. If someone with that track record stood before us, would we celebrate her as a role model, or would we call for accountability?" Foreshadowing. She'd been building to this. Viewers leaned in, comments exploding across social media. Has she gone too far? What will Melania say? This is the most compelling thing I've seen in years. Behind the scenes, producers frantically tapped their watches. Sponsors called affiliates demanding an explanation. But the moment had snapped free, uncontrollable, raw. Melania's response was the briefest flicker of anger. "This is political theater," she spat, but her voice trembled on the last word, betraying the calm mask. Jasmine's reply was surgical. "Truth isn't theater. It's our duty." Then the small climax. The host, finally finding his voice, said, "Mrs. Trump, would you like to address these specific transactions?" Silence. The empty seconds stretched. Melania's lips parted, closed. Her world of influence and spin had no answer for this moment. At home, viewers held their breath. That pregnant pause was a cliffhanger in itself. Would she deny, deflect, or flee? The conflict wasn't over, far from it, but the power dynamic had shifted. The polished emblem of privilege stared down the unvarnished force of accountability. And just like that, what began as a standard news panel became an ungovernable spectacle, one that left every viewer asking, can ambition wielded in secret ever withstand the light of truth? Jasmine knew that a single spark could ignite the fuse she had meticulously laid. As soon as the cameras cut to commercial, she slipped back into a quiet control room corner and opened her encrypted briefcase. Inside lay the next phase of her reckoning. A series of sealed affidavits, European bank ledgers, and offshore trust documents that Melania had assumed were forever buried. Each file was tabbed, highlighted, cross-referenced, a surgical arsenal of truth. She glanced at her chief of staff, Kenny, whose eyes were fixed on a monitor showing the countdown clock, 3 minutes to air. "This is more than spectacle," she reminded him. "It's accountability." That reminder, her personal mantra, echoed in her mind. They'd practiced the sequence in hushed diner booths, circling every question, every reveal, until it felt inevitable. Back on set, the host introduced the segment as a brief look at ethics. But Jasmine's calm voice immediately shattered that pretense. She began with the simplest question. "Mrs. Trump, you've built an image of elegance and discretion. But can discretion become a weapon?" The words cut like a blade. The studio lights felt hotter. The audience leaned in. That was Jasmine's mini hook, an invitation to lean forward, to brace for impact. She tapped a button on her tablet, triggering a slide. Melania's first marriage certificate, stamped and signed, its Greek script nearly erased by time. "This was filed under Melania Navs," Jasmine said. "Wedding certificate older than your marriage to Donald Trump, yet public records show no divorce filing, no closure. Why erase the past when you're so proud of your present?" Melania's facade flickered. Her fingers tightened on the table's edge. "That's private," she shot back, voice brittle. "Privacy is respected," Jasmine replied, voice steady as a metronome, "until it becomes a shield for deception." Next, she flipped the slide to a 2004 email chain between Melania and a European modeling agent discussing a fund routed through a British Virgin Island shell company. "If you were in New York full-time, why were you transferring thousands through offshore accounts named for your cousin?" A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Another mini-climax. Social media would eat this alive. Jasmine pressed on before the room could catch its breath. "We believe in reinvention, but at what cost? When you abandoned Andre in Slovenia, did you pause to consider the lives you left behind, or was he just collateral damage on your path to power?" Her voice dropped, drawing every listener in. "Tonight, I'm not here to settle old scores. I'm here to prevent the powerful from hiding behind polished smiles." That line, foreshadowing redemption, hung in the air like a challenge. Behind the scenes, production assistants whispered frantic cues, but Jasmine's plan was in motion. She had rehearsed the transition so that each revelation built upon the last. From marital eraser to offshore financing, from emotional abandonment to strategic alliances. It was domino logic. One tile knocked down another until the entire facade teetered. Then came the cupographs. Jasmine withdrew a sealed envelope labeled Confidential, U.S. Attorney's Office. She slid it across the table. This memo predates your husband's campaign announcement by months. It outlines a federal inquiry into real estate transactions you initiated under an alias. There was a witness, a Slovenian accountant, who disappeared days after cooperating. No follow-up. No closure. The silence that followed was thunderous. Melania's eyes filled with a flicker of panic, proof that Jasmine's strategy had worked. She had moved from broad questions to incontrovertible evidence, from emotion to undeniable fact. In that moment, viewers realized they weren't watching a sound bite. They were witnessing the execution of a plan so precise it left no room for spin. The countdown hit 0. Cameras rolled on, and Jasmine Crockett stood poised at the center of a courtroom that spanned the nation, ready to deliver the first blow in a battle the powerful never saw coming. She started with the divorce certificate, an unassuming document that became Exhibit A. Jasmine laid it flat on the table and let the camera linger. The faded ink, the official stamp, the name Melania Navs. "Mrs. Trump," Jasmine began, voice unwavering. "This marriage ended in silence. Yet no record of divorce exists in public archives. How does one erase an entire relationship from history?" A ripple passed through the studio. Melania's composed exterior fractured as she lifted her eyes. Before she could respond, Jasmine reached into her folder and pulled out the first set of photocopies. Emails exchanged between Melania and her Slovenian attorney in 2003 discussing asset transfers to a British Virgin Islands trust. The screen behind Jasmine flashed the email headers in bold. "You can see the urgency," Jasmine said, leaning in. "Funds moved overnight. No audit trail for years. Why hide these transactions?" Melania swallowed. Her voice came out tight and clipped. "That was handled by my team. I had no involvement." Jasmine held up a hand. "Involvement is defined by signatures, Mrs. Trump." She pointed to one signature block circled in red. "Your signature. Dated June 14th, 2003. Not a facsimile. Not a proxy. You signed it." Cut to Melania's eyes widening, then narrowing. Viewers at home sensed the moment had shifted from accusation to proof. Comments began flooding social media. "Oh my God, she's done. This is insane." Jasmine let the chatter settle before delivering the next blow. She tapped her tablet, and the backdrop changed to a scanned affidavit from Syracuse, New York, dated June 17th, 2011. "This is an affidavit filed by a Slovenian accountant cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office," Jasmine explained. 2 weeks later, she vanished. The image zoomed in on the witness's name, redacted except for the first letter. L. Crockett's voice grew quieter, but more intense. "No inquiries. No follow-up. Case closed for insufficient evidence. But where did the money go? And why did the witness disappear?" That was the first small climax within the climax. Viewers realized this wasn't just about shell companies. It touched on potential foul play, even endangerment of a whistleblower. The tension mounted. Melania shifted in her chair. Her silk blouse rustled as she crossed her arms. She looked to Felix Roman, the moderator, who opened his mouth to intervene, then thought better of it. The rules of live TV give the speaker the floor. Jasmine took a breath and pressed on. "Next, let's talk about the pattern you created for profit and protection," she said. And the screen behind her displayed a map with arrows tracing wire transfers. Slovenia, Zurich, Miami, BVI, Delaware. A simple path for simple laundering. Or so you thought. Each arrow pulsed in red. She clicked again. Now the map pulsed green, where grants from a Florida charity, frozen in Melania's name, were supposed to have gone. Schools in Tampa Bay, youth centers in Orlando. Instead, Jasmine continued, the trail stopped at a shell account in Nassau. "You publicly championed this charity," Jasmine said, voice firm. "But the children never saw those funds. How do you justify that?" The host finally interjected. "Mrs. Trump, these are serious allegations. Would you care to respond?" Melania's lips parted, but no words emerged. The audience saw every micro-expression, her jaw tightening, her eyelids fluttering. Jasmine moved to the final act of her presentation. She withdrew a manila envelope labeled Confidential, Do Not Disclose, and slid it across the table. Inside were 6 faded property deeds from upstate New York. Small homes bought and resold within 18 months for double their purchase price under different shell companies, none of which listed renovations or actual occupants. Imagine a grandmother building equity in her home, Jasmine said, voice low but carrying, only to see a corporation swoop in, flip it for quick profit, and vanish. She allowed a moment for the audience to feel the injustice. These deeds tie back to names you used: Holdings, VMK Enterprises, and White Rose Trust, all linked to your signature on earlier patent filings in Zurich. A staffer's camera captured Melania's hand, shaking as she reached for her coffee mug. The juxtaposition was stark. The poised figure of a former First Lady, her world unraveling in real time. Behind the scenes, producers signaled the end of the segment was near. Yet, Jasmine refused to relent. She sensed she had them on the ropes. Finally, she said, pulling out a single-page memo bearing an official header. This memo ordered the closure of an investigation in 2011. No public explanation. It states, quote, "Case files are to remain sealed due to national interest considerations." Who made that call and what interest was being protected? Silence fell. Even the hum of the lighting rig seemed to pause. The host tried to steer back to the scripted topics, but the audience and the nation had moved beyond politics as usual. As the show cut to a bewildered commercial break, Jasmine closed her folder and sat back, face impassive. The damage was done. In just 12 minutes of relentless fact-based questioning, she had exposed a hidden trajectory from a small-town marriage to the pinnacle of American power, laced with deception and exploitation. Social media ignited instantly. Clips of Jasmine's pointed questions and the documents flashing on screens surged across Twitter and TikTok. Hashtags like #ExposingElegance and #EA First Lady Files trended. Viewers couldn't turn away. Backstage, Jasmine's pulse was steady, but her heart thundered with the awareness that what she'd unleashed could not be contained. Allies texted praise. Opponents threatened legal action. Yet in that moment, she embodied the principle she had championed for years. Accountability over anonymity, truth over spin, courage over complacency. As the next segment began without her, viewers at home realized they were not watching a news panel. They were witnessing a reckoning. And in the days to come, neither Melania nor the Republican establishment would find cover from what had just been unleashed on live television. Melania's team erupted first. As the cameras cut away, her PR chief posted a blistering statement. These vicious, unfounded attacks would not stand, and legal action was imminent. Within minutes, every major network had dissected the 7-minute segment. Some anchors labeled it political character assassination. Others called for a full ethics investigation. Backstage, production assistants overheard frantic phone calls from Trump World demanding tapes be erased. Across social media, the backlash was instantaneous. Hashtags like #YourFirstLadyFiles and #ExposingElegance trended nationally within the hour. Troll armies launched smear campaigns against Jasmine, accusing her of racism, opportunism, and forgery. But at the same time, a counterwave of support surged. Midnight saw Farah Odom's fact-check thread blow up. She posted side-by-side scans of the Swiss patent, the Syracuse affidavit, the BVI wire transfers, each tweet racking up hundreds of thousands of likes. "If this isn't a reckoning," she wrote, "what is?" Journalists from The Atlantic to The Guardian reached out for interviews, hungry to validate the documents. By 2 a.m., text messages flooded Jasmine's phone. Former federal clerks offering sealed memos, a retired Syracuse Herald reporter promising to dig up her old notes, and even a whisper from a one-time Melania confidant who confirmed the shell company network. Some messages carried threats, anonymous videos of Jasmine walking to her car, ominous phrases like, "Be careful what you uncover." Yet, every warning only strengthened public fascination. In Washington, Capitol Hill buzzed. A bipartisan group of representatives quietly discussed forming a subcommittee to examine the allegations. On cable news, talking heads couldn't agree on party lines. Some Democrats called Jasmine a hero, while conservative voices tried to dismiss the evidence as circumstantial. Local radio hosts in Pennsylvania and Florida aired call-in specials, and community book clubs dissected the transcript as if it were a thriller novel. By morning, campus newspapers had published op-eds. Why we must demand truth of our First Lady, silence as a tool of power. Student activists rallied outside the embassy in D.C., chanting Jasmine's name and waving copies of the folder she laid bare. Even celebrities weighed in, actors, athletes, authors, urging investigations and applauding her courage. Meanwhile, Melania's calendar emptied. A planned keynote at a women's leadership summit was quietly canceled. Her university appearance was postponed indefinitely. Her public silence spoke volumes. In a final understated move, her legal team filed a terse lawsuit threat. Defamatory statements will be met with full force of the law, but offered no evidence to refute the documents Jasmine presented. Amid the storm, Jasmine stood firm. In her Capitol Hill office, she pinned a printed tweet from a teacher in Montana. "You restored my faith that one voice can matter." She looked out at the PTOIC Sunrise folder on her desk and allowed herself a moment of calm triumph. The results were clear. A former First Lady's legacy had been cracked wide open. A national conversation had ignited around accountability. And one determined Congresswoman had shown that in the arena of power, silence is not safety, it's surrender. In the aftermath of the showdown, one truth stands out unchecked. Ambition flourishes in the shadows. Melania Trump's rise from a quiet Slovenian bride to America's most photographed First Lady was paved with carefully concealed choices and silent transactions. Yet, even the densest facade cracks under pressure when relentless accountability shines its light. We learned that power, when divorced from transparency, becomes a weapon against the innocent. A missing divorce filing may seem trivial, until you realize it speaks to a willingness to erase entire lives for personal gain. Offshore accounts and shell companies aren't mere financial instruments. They are cloaks for those who believe they can maneuver above scrutiny. But Jasmine Crockett's courage teaches us that the greatest power lies not in wealth or status, but in the willingness to stand alone with facts in hand. She reminded us that every hidden ledger and every buried affidavit is a story waiting to be told, and that one voice armed with truth can crack an illusion millions have long accepted. Ask yourself, when have you let silence protect the powerful? How often have you dismissed a nagging suspicion because exposing it felt too risky? This story challenges us to reclaim our collective responsibility. We are not passive observers but custodians of a democracy that demands scrutiny as much as it demands speech. The lesson here is not vengeance, it's vigilance. It isn't about tearing down one person, but about upholding a principle. That legitimacy is earned through openness, not manufactured through omission. In an era of spin and spectacle, we must remember, the spotlight is not an enemy, it's the very guardrail that prevents power from running unchecked. So, the next time you hear a polished statement or see a flawless image, ask what's hidden beneath the gloss. Because true justice doesn't come from elegant silences. It comes when we refuse to let the powerful hide behind them. We've witnessed how ambition, cloaked in silence, can unravel when someone dares to shine a light on the truth. Melania Trump's carefully buried past, from a secret first marriage to offshore dealings, couldn't withstand Jasmine Crockett's relentless pursuit of accountability. What started as a 7-minute segment exploded into a national reckoning, proving that no amount of power or prestige can silence documented facts. If this story moved you, it's on all of us to keep asking the hard questions. Smash that like button to signal you stand for transparency. Hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next deep dive into power and accountability. Drop a comment below. When have you seen the powerful hide behind their image, and how did you react? Share this video with friends, family, and anyone who believes our democracy deserves more than polished illusions. And check out our next episode, where we uncover the untold story of a whistleblower who took on corporate giants and sparked real legislative change. Because the moment we stop digging is the moment we let silence win. And that's a price none of us can afford.